Hi, my name is cjrhen, and this is part 2 of Dorico for jazz arrangers. Last video we covered setup of Dorico and note input as well as accidental input, and now we're going to cover dynamics and inputting chord symbols. So now let's go ahead and work with some dynamics. To get started with that, we're going to be working with the side panel over here. And first let me explain the side panel. So looking over here, we have two options: the actual panels where you can access time signatures, key signatures, tempo, and dynamics. But there's also this keyboard here called popovers. We'll be using popovers a lot in later parts of this series. This lets you access things like the rehearsal marker and some other things that actually are not even available under the normal panels. This is mostly for physical looking elements that you can interact with, musical elements. So go ahead and click panels, and let's go ahead to the forte sign right here so we can insert some dynamics. Go ahead and pick the note you want to put a piano on, and let's select piano. Simple, right? And let's make it get loud through this phrase. Let's go ahead and select this E here and put a forte. Let's draw and select all the way from the note with the piano up to excluding the note with the forte. And let's draw a crescendo, which you can see under the gradual dynamics. I'm using the hairpins. And just like that, it automatically draws them and spaces them, and it looks good. So from here, let's make this note soft again. Let's do a pianissimo. So pick the note you want, select the pianissimo, and we're going to make it crescendo all the way to this. And here we actually have some other dynamic options. I'm going to put a forte piano to designate that they hit it and get soft. Let's pick it, and let's select this, all the notes leading up to that, put a crescendo. Notice it automatically spaces it. And if you don't want it to go over this bar line like it's doing here, you see that it's crossing the bar line, pick it, come down to this bottom panel and click this down here to expand it, and make sure we're over here in this properties section. Select the element we want to adjust. In this case, it's our hairpin crescendo, and we have all sorts of options for this. I'm going to click bar line interaction, and it's already set for stop before when I enable that. So now it's not crossing that bar line. Now, on this note, let's go ahead and insert a fermata just so we can play with some of the other symbols. So come over here to our panels. You see all these various options. We're going to click, hold and pauses. I'm going to insert a fermata. So you'll notice with this fermata, once it's inserted, it inserts automatically on the other staffs. So let's go ahead and insert a second part and see what we do if we have a resolution. So maybe one part holds a whole note on that fermata, but one moves and then it sits. Click this bass clef staff here. I'm going to insert a dotted quarter note B. So I click 6 and then a period. Then I'm going to put a B flat. That's an eighth note. I'm going to click 5 for eighth note, and it automatically clears our dot. Put a B flat. And then I'm going to put 7, and I'm going to click A for a half note. And you'll notice this can be dragged over to anywhere within this bar. So now the hold actually occurs there in playback, which you can adjust how long it holds, but also just for visuals. So now that we got a grasp on working with dynamics and fermatas, and that kind of gives us a foundational understanding of the musical elements that we can use and interact with in Dorico, we're going to move ahead to working with chord symbols, customizing those chord symbols to what we like to see and how we like to notate them, and give us all the tools we need to make lead sheets. And then in the next video, we'll be working with slash notations and other rhythm notations and rhythm cues. That way we will be able to get started with small jazz arranging and even big band arranging. To get started, I'll show you how to input a chord, and you'll see quickly that they're not going to look the way we prefer as commercial and jazz arrangers. I'll show you how to change those, and then I'll show you how to write all the available chords to us and look the way we want them to look. To insert a chord, we're going to go ahead and pick anywhere on the page. I'm going to be working with the music from the last video just because it's in the key of E, so it'll give us some kind of basis to be thinking about. I'm going to pick the beginning of this bar, and we're going to click Shift Q to bring up the chord input popover. In here, you can type whatever kind of chord you want. I'm going to type E min7 for E minor 7 and enter it, and you'll see it automatically formatted it a specific way because I have a setting set a particular way. So let's find a chord that might not look the way we want right now. So I'm picking just anywhere right now, and I'm just going to put C major 7. So notice it actually wrote C, M, A, J 7. I personally prefer to have the triangle, but to make it so all our major 7 chords always have the triangle instead of saying major, we're going to have to go play with the engrave settings. So there's two ways to access the engraving settings. The first way is come up here to that system or menu toolbar, go to library and find engraving options, and you can pull that up. The other way is to use a key command that you would want to get pretty familiar with because you'll be opening this window fairly often in Dorico, is Control-Shift-E. Once we're in the engraving options window, we're going to want to find chord symbols. You can either do that by scrolling through the list over here and finding what you need to find, which is chord symbols in this scenario, or you can search the categories for chord and then find chord symbols. So once we're in the chord symbol settings in the engraving options, first thing you'll see is chord symbol presets, and here you can actually pick some which might be exactly what you're looking for. I personally have some specific settings I like to put, so I'm going to go ahead and just go through all the options available to us which pertain to jazz nomenclature and kind of dig into the weeds and how to get things looking what we want them to look like. So let's go ahead and scroll down to the first section, which is chord root. I'm not actually going to be changing anything in this section because this is how we generally like things to appear as jazz arrangers. The only thing you might be changing here is the vertical position of the accidental for the root note. I like to keep it so my accidental following my notes so I know what the root is large, but maybe you prefer it to be small. And it can be either on the upper part or the lower part of the root note. Scrolling down further, we're going to see some sections that aren't relevant for us working commercial in jazz notation. So solfege, we can go ahead and skip over. Nashville could be relevant to you, but for us, we're going to be not working with Nashville, working with standard notation. Just be aware you have options with this if you ever need to notate that in the future. Scrolling down to root only chord symbols. So this might have some relevance. In this case, I like to just leave it as F, PED, dot for pedal. You can get rid of the dot, or you can have the full word spelled out. And to apply any change to those, click apply in this corner and it will apply universally over your entire score. I'm going to keep it where it was at with fped dot. Scrolling down to the next setting, this is where we start to get into all of the relevant adjustments we need to be making. So first, with this appearance of major triads, I personally just leave it as the chord, but I've seen people make adjustments to that, so please do that as you see fit. For the appearance of minor triads, I'm going to leave it as the lowercase m because I think that's most descript. There's obviously other options. I also choose this because sometimes when I'm doing my parts, if I can fit 8 bars across a page with slash notation, having just the M or even just the minus helps fit those full 8 bars without things looking cramped. The last setting we can change for major and minor qualities of the bass triads is just moving where the symbol, if there is a symbol on the major triad and definitely on the minor, appears. I like to leave it just as I left my accidental before, but you can make it a superscript or a subscript. Scrolling down further, we start to get into some other bass triad and even 7th chord settings. For this one, we're talking about diminished chords. So for the appearance of my diminished triad, I think all of us here agree we want to use the circle. So go ahead and pick the circle here and click apply. And let's scroll down to look at the appearance of diminished 7th. I think just so there's parity between the diminished triad and the diminished 7th, and also just I think all of our preference working commercial and jazz arranging, let's go ahead and pick the circle, but with the 7 for the diminished 7th. Go ahead and click apply to that. Just like we had the option to move things either to a superscript or subscript or leave them in line with the root quality of the chord, you can do that here again with your diminished chords. Notice here you actually have to set the vertical position differently if you have the text versus the symbol. So I like my symbol to be a superscript, so I'm going to leave it as is. Scrolling down further, we're going to get to the appearance of half diminished seventh chords. I know many people who prefer to have the minor 7 flat 5, which in that case you don't have to change anything. I personally prefer the half diminished symbol, the circle with a line through it, with a seventh, so I'm going to pick that and click apply, and notice we can also set that vertical position of that symbol just like we did with diminished. I like to make sure my diminished symbol, my half diminished symbol appear in the same place, and they are both already set as superscripts, so there's nothing I have to do with that. Scrolling down further, we'll get to the appearance of augmented triads and augmented seventh chords. In this case, we have to set our triad first, and whatever we set our triad to will also reflect how our seventh chord appears. I personally prefer just to have the plus, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that and click apply. There's a couple different options, and I see all these kind of fairly regularly except the sharp 5 option. Let's go ahead and make sure for us, we like to have our 7 show after the augmented symbol. It should already be set to that, and this will apply even if you have a symbol plus 5, it'll still put the 7th after whatever quality you're applying to that chord. And now we can also set that vertical position just like we were doing everything else. And remember, with diminish and half diminish, we had it set to that superscript, so it's up, it's like a circle in the top right hand corner of that symbol. I like to keep my plus in line with my root quality and the accidental that goes along with it, so there's nothing I have to change there. Scrolling down further, we'll see all sorts of options for suspended chords. In general, these are already set the way we prefer to see them as commercial and jazz arrangers. The only thing you might be changing is the vertical position of those. A lot of people like to do them as superscripts. I've also seen them subscripts. I'm going to just go ahead and leave them in baseline. Under the vertical position of suspended notes dialog right here, we also have the option to change whether that's sus in augmented text. If you have your augmented chord set to AUG instead of a plus symbol, to all capital letters. By default, it's set to lowercase, so I'm going to leave it as is. Scrolling down further, we can actually now set the position of our 7 on any chord that has a 7 in there. This will also affect if you make something like a C9 instead of a C7. If you put C9, this would also be affected by wherever we set the position of the 7th here. Notice we can set it as a baseline, meaning it's in line with our root quality and our accidental, but we can make it a superscript or a subscript. There are also additional options here, and this is only relevant if you're setting it for a subscript, so only mess with this if you're setting it to subscript. I don't think most of us are. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the appearance of the 6/9 chord. This will apply to any 6/9 chord, whether it's major or minor, and frankly I think a lot of us have a preference on this, and my personal preference is actually this diagonal arrangement here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that and click apply. So let's go ahead and scroll down further, and now we get to the appearance of major 7th chords. So if you remember, this is what actually prompted us to even go looking for the engraving options to change the way chords appear in the first place. So here, instead of having to have an MAJ for major, I can set it to the triangle. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and don't forget to click apply. And remember, this is only going to apply to major 7th chords because we already set our triads near the top of the engraving options for chord symbols. While we're here, we're going to make sure this triangle appearance here includes the 7th. If you get rid of that, what will end up happening is you'll have an F triangle with no 7. I think that's a little too ambiguous for us to be working with. The other setting available to us here is the appearance in chords with other intervals. So this basically means if you make like a C major 9 as shown here, since we have it set to triangle and we have include 7, this would display as C triangle 9, so there's nothing we need to change right there. So the last setting I plan to change is actually going to be the appearance of minor major 7 chords or augmented major 7th chords. So let's go ahead and scroll down till we see appearance in minor or augmented chords. And this is affecting how the 7 or the major 7 aspect that is applied. So here I'm going to go ahead and select the triangle, and this is basically going to put the symbol, which is our lowercase m, or the plus as I set it in my personal settings, and then put the triangle after. And because we already set the triangle triangle with the 7, there will also be a 7 attached to that as well. So in general, there are going to be many more available options to us here, working with all sorts of settings, whether it's major chords, alterations, and you can get really specific with this. I think now that we have these baseline settings put a specific way, all the other default Dorico settings are actually going to get us the results we'd like. So make sure everything is applied, and let's go ahead and close out of the engraving options, and let's go ahead and write some chords. So from here, click any note or go ahead and find a blank measure and select the whole note rest. Let's go ahead and insert a C major 7. So click Shift Q and type C major 7 for C major 7, and notice it automatically puts that symbol in for us now that we have set that in our engraving options as our default C major 7 appearance. No matter what we type in there, if we can type the full word major, we will still get the triangle. This also applies if we change that 7 to a 9 or a 13. So let's go ahead and insert a more complicated chord. So click Shift Q anywhere on a blank measure for now. Shift Q. I'm going to type C major 9 sharp 11 and enter. Notice it automatically put the triangle again, and it also did our extension as a superscript. So now let's select another empty measure and let's try a minor chord. Let's go Shift Q, and I'm going to put a D minor 11. Notice even though I typed M-I-N when I was entering the chord, it automatically put M for D minor 11. And also, it automatically put the 11 in place of what would normally be the 7. Now let's go ahead and insert a half diminished chord. So there's two ways to notate this. Here's the first way. I'm going to put E half dim, or you could type out the full word diminished and then 7, and it will automatically turn that half dim into our half diminished symbol. Now, because we set our preference to use the half diminished symbol and not the minor 7 flat 5, if we go down here into another empty bar and we click Shift Q to input a chord, if we put E minor 7 flat 5, it'll automatically change that to the half diminished symbol. That way, everywhere in our score, this matches. The next chord we'll input is just a diminished triad. So go ahead and click Shift Q to insert a chord anywhere. Let's type G, and then let's just put the letter O and click enter. This automatically puts the diminished symbol for us. We can also input that by typing out the word diminished or just D-I-M. Let's select another empty bar and let's do the diminished 7th chord, the fully diminished 7th chord. Let's click Shift Q to input a chord. Let's type A, and I'm going to type D-I-M-7, and notice we get a fully diminished 7th chord. Next, we're going to insert a couple augmented chords. First, let's just insert an augmented triad. So click anywhere, Shift Q, let's put D-A-U-G. And notice we get the D augmented triad with the plus that we designated it to show as before in the engraving options. Come find another empty bar, let's put Shift Q, and let's type D plus. And when you click enter, notice you also get the D augmented with the plus symbol. And that's because in the engraving options, it will automatically always autocorrect it to the same one, even if you type out the word or if you type out the symbol. So now we're going to insert an augmented 7th chord. Click anywhere, click Shift Q, and I'm going to put B flat, AUG 7 for B flat augmented 7. And notice it automatically changes that AUG to the plus symbol as we designated before. Let's go ahead and insert an augmented major 7. So I'm going to click anywhere again. I'm going to put F augmented major 7. I literally typed AUG for augmented and I typed MAJ for major, and when I click enter, notice it automatically fills in the symbols now that we have that set in the engraving options. The next chord we can insert is a minor major 7. I'm going to click anywhere, click Shift Q. I'm going to put B minor major 7, literally MIN-MAJ 7, and it automatically puts in the symbols I have set. The next types of chords I'm going to be showing you is sus chords. So go ahead, scroll over anywhere, find an empty bar. I'm going to click Shift Q, and I'm going to just type C sus 4, and notice just like we have it set, we get a C sus 4. Now, I personally don't prefer sus chords. I almost always write mine as a slash chord just because I think it's a little more descript for instrumentalists. I'll make a jazz harmony or music theory video later on my philosophy on sus chords, but let's go ahead and insert one. Click anywhere, click Shift Q, and now we can insert a chord with any quality, any extension, and put it over any root note with the slash. So let's go ahead and input for, say, F minor 7 over B flat. Just like that, it'll automatically draw that slash chord for us. The next types of chords we're going to input are dominant chords. So let's go ahead, click anywhere, and let's insert a basic G7. Just like that, a G7 is drawn, but let's go ahead and do something a little more complex. Let's insert somewhere else. I'm going to put E13 sharp 11. That chord's implying there's a 9, sharp 11, and 13. And just like that, any extra extensions that are beyond the 7 or whatever's replacing the 7 automatically get put into a superscript. Let's go ahead and insert something even more complicated down here in an empty bar. Shift Q, I'm going to put F sharp 7, flat 9, sharp 9, flat 13. Notice it automatically puts those in parentheses and draws those, and there are settings to change that however you want them to be displayed. I personally like mine vertically stacked, so I keep it just like that. The last chords I'll talk about are 6/9 chords, so go ahead, click anywhere, click Shift Q. Let's just put an E flat and just type 6/9. It automatically draws that as we set it in our engraving options. This will also apply if we were to do it for minor. So go ahead, Shift Q, E flat, minor, 6/9. I hope you enjoyed this video. Next one, we'll be covering rhythm section arranging, slash notation, rhythm section cues. After that, we'll be covering page layout, system breaks, frame breaks, and general formatting, and then we'll be able to make some finished scores and lead sheets. Please leave a like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, ask them down in the comments. Also, please give me video recommendations. If you want to check out my music, go ahead and check out cjrhenmusic.com. Thank you.